Hi guys, Alan here. Let's talk filtration. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the sponge filter. As we all know, it's a very cheap and efficient, runs off an airline. As you can see, the top part has a pickup pipe, that's where the air bubbles come out. Large surface area, kind of ideally suited to shrimp tank in my opinion, and quite small tanks. The pros of these is very inexpensive. They do make a little bit of noise, but you could deal with that by putting an air stone in the bottom. They're unsightly, they do take up a lot of room, and of course obviously the pollution's still in the tank, but very good filter. I would recommend these especially for small fry and shrimp. And if you're going to use one of these, remember to always wash them out in old aquarium water. So that's it really for the sponge filter. I would recommend them for small tanks, say shrimp. Excellent stuff. Okay, Matin filters. We have, as you can see by the picture, it takes up a little bit of the tank. Similar to the sponge filter, they've got an airlift tube, but a huge surface area, so basically your filtration is going to stay a lot cleaner. You get something called mum, which is very good, it happens in nature, and obviously brilliant for fry. It gives them a source of food, including shrimp as well. There are some issues that I have with this, and I have used it in the past. You want probably a 30 grade one, which is basically at the gaps in the filtration in the actual sponge itself. This is installed. Now when you install it, as you can see, you can run it very similar. You can have your equipment. Very rare if you have it the whole length of your tank like the first picture showed, you're never really going to get a blocking. Because it's got a huge surface area, you don't really need to clean it that often. I mean, my one's been there for 2 years, which means you get very mature bacteria. So the nitrogen cycle is fantastic. It really works. I would say it's more mechanical than biological. However, as you can see, most biological and mechanical filters have a lot less surface area. This would take a lot to mop up. So this is a good one again for smaller tanks in my opinion, or you can have it on a bigger tank I suppose, but I would prefer on a small tank with fry, or breeding tanks would be good where you don't have many plants. So that's the Matin filter, which again is very similar and runs the same way as a sponge filter. So we're going to have a look at the next one now. Let's have a look. Okay, under gravel filters, I've used these in quite a few tanks. Generally I wouldn't use them in planted aquariums because obviously anything that you put in there, you know, like root tabs or anything, are just going to be destroyed by it. Basically they use an air stone, or you can use a mechanical pump. I prefer air stone. Very good for keeping your aquascape neat and tidy. I've actually used these mainly with rocks, so I use these with cichlids. Again, I wouldn't use them for goldfish, purely because, as we all know, goldfish are poop factories. They are good, but again, when it comes to cleaning, you're looking at all the substrate on top. I would probably use one of these in a bare bottom situation with, or with sand maybe. You could use these with sand if you put a little film over the top, which is what I done with the last one I had. But again, I would use these probably on a smaller tank. I wouldn't use these in a fry tank. I would definitely use these with maybe shell dwellers, cribs, small dwarf cichlids, or even convicts, a larger cichlid. Apart from that, I'm not overly keen on them. Again, I believe that you should have a mechanical clean first, then a biological clean, and if you need chemical afterwards. And remember, you can't change anything about this filter. That's it. That's how it is. Again, they are cheap, but you'd have to put them in, you know, they're not sort of generically made to fit a particular tank. So again, you'd have issues with that maybe. Again, filtration is very specific. I'm going to talk about this at the end, about how I would do my filters from now on. Okay, sumps. Now these are very professional grade sumps, as you can see from that. all your equipment goes in there. Generally used on marine tanks, but you can use them on that. I've actually had a tank, a 6-foot tank, which had a sump on it. And good thing about sumps is all your equipment goes in there. Everything you need goes in there. The water overflows out of your tank via a box or a hole, goes into there, goes through various chambers, which you can have whatever you want in there. As you can see in this one here, we've got some bio balls, we've got some sponge, we've got some weed. This Kato that they use in the marine is great for taking out certain nitrates, and it's a very good way of filtration. I personally would only use this on something huge, where you really want to have a main display without any equipment in it. Obviously you'd put your heaters in here. You'd probably have to have quite a strong return pump. All your maintenance is done outside of the tank, so there's no chance of upsetting your fish or shrimp or whatever else. So they are quite cool. They are expensive, of course, and generally you need a lot of space. Every filter in here that we've talked about today needs to have a certain space allocated to it. These are no exception. You will need a dedicated light if you're going to put any kind of plants in there, which are great. I mean, if you put plants in there, you can have a filter that takes out all the nitrate. So there we have it. They're your main sort of filters. Internal filters, very similar to your external, apart from obviously they're inside the tank. Again, normally you get a sponge, and then followed by some rings or some, I always check that out. Sintered glass by Eheim, that's the way to go. Substrat Pro, very good stuff. I would use that in every filter I got. In the one I've got at the moment, for instance, in the internal one, I've got nearly a kilo of it, which is a hell of a lot. It's a hell of a lot of stuff. Gives you a little bit of flow. You can use these up near the surface. Some have a little air port, so you can put a little bit of airline tubing on them. Generally used for smaller tanks. The only problem with these is there's no way of protecting your fry. With the external ones, you get a tube that goes in, you can put a bit of sponge on the end, job done. These, ideally, I would use these in smaller tanks. You can get them up to 200 litres. Now remember, with every filter, I would suggest whatever it says is the maximum, always halve it. If you halve it, you'll never ever be a problem. You can't over filter, you can only under filter, and you can add a little bit of carbon in there if you're treating your tank with anything. But we'll talk about that at the end of the video. This is a selection of them out there. It's really choice, but look at the litres per hour. You want to turn your tank over at least 4 times, I would say. Generally, that's the way to go. And again, with these, they do clog up quite quickly, and the filter is still in your tank. So therefore, any detritus or anything is still going to be inside your tank. Okay, next we have the external canister filter. As you can see, the one on the screen is the FX6, made generally for very large tanks. I mean, you can use them on small, there are small versions out there, but generally for larger ones. They have 2 types of filtration in there, which is your mechanical and your biological. The mechanical being the sponges. Generally you'll have a sponge, then your biological, then your chemical. That's how it works. So with one of these, you're going to have all the real muck taken out by the sponges. Then the clean water is going to go onto the bacteria cultivation, which is ceramic rings, something like that. Ideally, when you want a decent biological bacteria to grow, you're better off using something like a sintered glass, very porous. In mine, I've actually got pumice stone, very good stuff. Don't, in my opinion, stay away from your plastics. Your plastics are designed to be clean. So bacteria have trouble sort of hanging on, although you do get a good culture by that time you've washed it off anyway. So these are very good. Large tanks, I would say, goldfish tanks, anything from about 240 litres upwards. You can have them on sort of 120s, that's no problem. But anything else, you know, they can be expensive, and obviously you need to make sure you've got a right amount of room. They do take up a lot of room. This one actually has a vacuum put on it, but there are other variants out there. And again, keep the mechanical and the biological together, which is a good thing. Right, up next, we'll have a look. Okay, so whichever one you choose, there's some basic principles that you need to adhere to, really. You can make your own. You can make your own out of squash bottles, water bottles, whatever you need. I've seen people make huge ones out of water butts, dustbins and everything. But the main principle is obviously your flow. If you've got a 200 litre tank, you want 1,000 litre, you want to basically go for 4 to 5 times turnover. In this respect, wherever it says on the box, halve it. Um, they're not accurate. Now, if you look at the picture on the screen, you'll see that the idea is the water comes in, goes through the filters. Normally, I'd have a coarse one and then a fine one after that. So the last one that the water goes through is the fine. Then I'd go into your ceramic or into your biological media. As I say, Sintered Glass Substrate Pro by Eheim is fantastic. Pond Guru also does one. I've used that in a couple, never had any issues. You can also, when you're putting chemical in on the last chamber, just before the pump, you'd use your carbon. So the last thing, if you're medicating, now remember, you don't need carbon. Okay, you only need that if you're medicating your tank or you want to remove tanning, something like that. The more biological media you have, the more beneficial bacteria you can have, the clearer or the purer the water will be. So whichever one you choose, do it like this. You can have moving bed filters. Now, I'm not talking about moving bed filters because you need such a huge one. I mean, you'd need twice the size of a normal sump to justify having one. But these will all work 100%. So whichever you choose, remember the flow and the amount of biological ceramic stuff you can get in there. These are the ones you need to worry about. Anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off. We'll be doing a tank update soon. You take care now.